Today we're going to be talking about the hybrid style LARP weapons made by Epic Armoury, and I'll be comparing them to my personal adventuring sword from Calimacil. Greetings, adventurers. My name is Kramer, and I just recently went to the Reckoning LARP in Indiana. Brand new LARP, highly recommend you check it out, had a blast. But more on that in a later video. Now, I went with a couple friends of mine, and two of them were kind enough to lend me their weapons so that I could do this review. This is the battle-worn Footman sword lent to me by my best friend, and this is the Ranger sword lent to me by none other than Kit Clever from Skilltree. So we went to the LARP together, we had a lot of fun. This is the sword that he used. And if you haven't seen his channel yet, go ahead and check it out because he does a lot of really cool craft videos and teaches you how to make stuff and level up all of your crafting skills. And for comparison, this is the sword that I used, my personal adventuring sword. I have a video on it, and this is from the Calimacil custom sword builder. It is the Bellator handle on a long sword length diamond V8 blade, I believe. And the links to all of these weapons will be down in the description in case any of them tickles your fancy. They're not affiliate, unfortunately. I'll be sure to update if that changes because honestly, that would be pretty epic. Now, Epic Armoury is a huge LARP manufacturer. They make tons and tons of gear. I've owned a number of items from them before, but these hybrid style weapons are different than a lot of their other offerings, even ones that I have owned before, and we'll get to that in a second. So what is a hybrid weapon? What am I even talking about? Well, I'm calling them that because I honestly don't know what else to call them. And if I'm remembering correctly, I think they were originally marketed as hybrid weapons, but they now no longer have the word hybrid anywhere in their marketing, in the names of the weapons, or in videos about them. So these are a combination of your traditional EVA foam latex coated sword blade with a polyurethane cast and molded handle, which is a little bit different than a lot of other swords on the market. Originally, Epic Armoury had basically two lines of swords on offer, and I'm showing these because they're both cutlasses for comparison. This is their Ready for Battle line, also known as their RFB line, and they are the budget option that they have to offer. And then they had regular swords that had no real distinction other than a cool name that were built up a little bit more and just a little bit more expensive. Now, both of these lines were made pretty much with the industry standard at the time that they came out, which was a while ago now, of being a EVA foam latex coated blade and hilt, and the handle itself is a rubber that is completely circular wrapped in suede. Now, while the build quality of both of these weapons is quite good, I've never had one break or fail on me. I have had swords from other companies where the latex has deteriorated, but these ones have not, and I've had them for many years. The Ready for Battle line, which is this one, it's got a much thinner blade, and they generally tend to be much shorter. And I tend to feel as if they can be a little underbuilt. That's to be expected. You're paying anywhere between $30 and $60 for these, so they're cutting down on material costs. They're going to be shorter blades, they're going to be thinner blades, and they can feel a little bit like they're children's swords or something like that. Whereas these ones are slightly bigger, slightly better built. This is their regular line, fully latex EVA foam swords. Now, the thing that I dislike about all weapons that are like this, and this is not a knock against Epic Armoury, this is also an industry standard, is that the handles are completely circular, meaning that it's very difficult to index the blade and maintain your edge alignment. Now, it's a LARP, so edge alignment doesn't really matter, but I care, so that's just a personal thing. Epic Armoury does also have a fourth lineup of weapons offered, and this is called the Stronghold lineup. And those weapons are very comparable, I think, to what Calimacil is sort of doing with their full injection foam mold process. I haven't held one of those yet. The second I do, there will be a video on it, so that's all I will say for now. So just go ahead and compare this standard fully EVA foam latex Epic Armoury sword to this hybrid style Epic Armoury sword with the cast polyurethane handle. The one from Epic Armoury looks a whole lot more realistic, in my opinion. For one, they're able to get a lot more detail on that handle. The blade is fairly well profiled. It's got a nice edge to it. It's of course thicker because it's a LARP weapon, but it doesn't seem quite as boxy as this one feels to me. The edges are just a little bit smoother. And because the hilts are molded separately from the blades, very similar to Calimacil, they are able to get a lot of customization in. I believe that all of these models are capable of being sold in multiple weapon lengths with the same handle. The handle length might actually change a little bit. I can't confirm that because I only have the standard sized one-handed sword variations here. But they're also sold in the standard version here. They look nice and clean and shiny and brand new. And then they're sold in the battle-worn version as well, where they're a little bit blackened, maybe by rust or just time, and they've got chinks cut into the blade there. Very similar to the veteran series that comes from Calimacil. Now you might be asking the very important question, how can I tell the difference between a hybrid sword from Epic Armoury and one of their standard or otherwise fully latex weapons? Well, the hint is in the very question itself. Epic Armoury is the only company that I am aware of, at least that is majorly sold in the United States, that is making hybrid weapons like this. So go to Epic Armoury, especially if you are located in the UK. It'll be easier to ship to you because I believe they're a UK-based company. There'll be a link in the description. Or go to Medieval Collectibles if you are in the United States, because they have a very big warehouse in Indiana, and it'll be easier to ship to you. So go to Medieval Collectibles, link in the description, not affiliate, and then filter the LARP weapons by Epic Armoury. If it's not made by Epic Armoury, it probably isn't a hybrid. Now click on the sword that you're looking at and go to the item description. Somewhere it should say what materials it's made out of. It'll be a lot of bullet points, and it should say in there, hilt is made out of cast polyurethane or something like that. That is what you are looking for. And if you still just want to confirm, you want to see it with your eyes rather than just reading it because maybe someone typed something wrong, totally get that. You're buying on the internet, great. Go ahead and look at the pictures. Look at the pictures up close and you will see that not only is the coloring and the texturing on these polyurethane handles noticeably different from what you would get on a regular latex sword if you look at them and compare. What you're really looking for is this very distinctive cuff that comes up over the blade. All of the hybrid weapons have that. And if you get up close enough, you can sometimes even see the seams on the hilt where the cast came apart. So that's how you know that it's a hybrid weapon. I actually like the handles of these Epic Armoury swords a lot, especially this Ranger sword. It's got this very beautiful, almost 15th century style hilt. And they are also generally have smaller handles than a lot of other companies have on offer, both in terms of their grip size and also in terms of their grip length. They're not afraid to have smaller handles, and we know that smaller handles are generally more historical for swords, and I really like that very grounded and historical design approach they seem to be taking. I hope that that is a trend that continues as the LARP community continues to go forward. Now, how do these hybrid Epic Armoury weapons compare to a Calimacil? And I'm comparing them to a Calimacil because Calimacil is a very prevalent, ubiquitous brand, and they are also made using a cast. The only exception is that it's not just the hilt that is cast in a mold, it is the blade itself as well. Now, obviously the handles are directly comparable because they're made almost exactly the same way, just with different molds and different foam formulas probably. Now, the really neat thing about these is actually that distinctive cuff that comes up over the blade from the cast hilt, because it means that even when the crossguard bends, it's actually not pulling away from the blade, because where the crossguard meets the blade isn't a seam. This cuff here is the seam, and it's all one cast piece. So instead of the crossguard pulling away from the blade, the crossguard is pulling away from itself in a fully cast material. So very smart design. Conversely, with a Calimacil, the hilt and the blade are also made from separate molds and then combined in a finishing process. And that is so that they can have multiple weapon lengths with multiple different hilts, very customizable, without having to have an individual mold for every single blade that they have. But because the Calimacil blades don't have that little cuff, which, yeah, you could argue looks a little less realistic than a Calimacil does, and I would agree with you, but because they don't have that cuff, that means that the crossguard and the blade join at a seam that is glued together. And at least on all of the models that I have ever had from Calimacil, that means that when the crossguard bends too much, you actually see this separation between the blade and the crossguard where those are coming apart if the glue isn't fully set. Now, it's not breaking the sword, the sword's not going to deteriorate, they're very durable weapons, but it is just a little aesthetic factor that you should keep in mind. But I will say that the structure of the crossguards for both of these brands tends to be a little bit of a mixed bag, which was something that was surprising to me. It's difficult to tell why, because there's so many variables and factors. It could be just the batch of foam that they used to make the sword. It could be improvements in the actual design of the sword, but both seem to have an equal mix of structurally sound and structurally unstable crossguards. I'd say that probably the shorter the crossguard and the thicker the crossguard is, probably the better you're going to be. It's very difficult to tell, but so this Ranger sword, the crossguard is very flimsy. It's not going to do a very good job of actually being a crossguard, because it's just, you know, that strike's just going to blow right past it, especially with a heavier weapon like a Calimacil. My fingers are getting hit every time. But at the same time, this is also a Calimacil sword, and its crossguard is just as floppy. Whereas this belator handle is actually very strong here. I mean, like, it'll still glance off the edge there, but it functions a lot better. As does the Epic Armoury Footman sword.
Second, I thought I broke it off.
Okay, so while we were actually doing the testing on these, the hilt on this one, the crossguard actually did start to come apart a little bit. So my theory about how these were constructed isn't quite correct, because clearly they're still capable of breaking. Did hold up better until it didn't. So yeah, that was a bit of a bummer, and also really surprising, just because the material that this is really does feel a lot like the Calimacil hilts that I'm used to, and I've never had an issue with those as far as them actually breaking, but it really doesn't seem like that should happen. Granted, we were testing this at an angle and with force that it probably would never experience if you were actually sword fighting with a resisting opponent. Kit from Skilltree was the one helping me doing the testing, and he was able to fix it right up with some barge cement, so it has been reforged. It's just a little disappointing that it failed anyway, when my hypothesis was that it was designed not to do that. But it might just be that that cuff is there simply to hide the seam between the latex blade and the hilt, and it has nothing to do with preserving the crossguard. Now, the latex on the blades of the Epic Armoury swords is a lot thicker and more durable feeling than any other latex weapon that I have held to date. That includes Forgotten Dreams weapons, that includes other Epic Armoury weapons, that includes ones from Windless Steelcrafts. They make Larp weapons, although I don't think they make them anymore. But this is a very durable feeling latex, very thick coating. You can just tell by the feel, feels denser than the other Epic Armories that I have. And while it definitely isn't as cut resistant or weather resistant as a Calimacil is, you would not want to leave one of these in a hot car. It would melt. And you do have to maintain the blade with a silicone spray to keep it from drying out and eventually cracking. If this was my sword, if the Footman sword was my sword, I would hold no fear in my heart that they would deteriorate anytime soon, either from dropping them on the battlefield or drawing them in and out of a sheath or hitting someone's chainmail. This is a very durable feeling latex. I feel very confident in it. I've been playing around with these swords for the last couple of weeks, and it just feels really good. The profiles between an Epic Armoury sword and a Calimacil are quite comparable in my opinion. They both have a LARPy but more realistic blade profile, I would say, and then the edges on them are slightly different. Calimacil is able to achieve a much thinner edge on a lot of their newer weapons because of their mold technology is getting better and better, whereas the edges on the Epic Armoury sword are fairly rounded. Now, is that less realistic to look at? Yes. Is it more comfortable to be hit with? Absolutely. And that is also due to the fact that, one, when you're swinging an edge at something, it's compressing a lot more energy into a smaller space, so it's going to hurt a little bit more. But because the blades on the Calimacil swords are cast in a mold, that means that you actually end up sometimes with some seam residue on the edges, the actual edges of your Calimacil sword. And if you're striking against bare skin, you can scratch someone. You know, you're not going to injure anyone. I don't think you draw blood, but that is just something to consider. So how do these weapons handle when you're actually fighting with them? That's very important, probably more important than how they're actually made. You might not even care. But being a latex weapon, even though the hilt is cast in polyurethane, of course the Epic Armoury swords are a lot lighter and a lot faster to wield. So depending on what you're looking for, that could either be a pro or a con, but I will say that these are actually very well weighted for being latex bladed weapons. The point of balance is about actually where you'd want it to be on a real sword, even though it's obviously much lighter. It's just probably about 4 or 5 inches up from the hilt on the Ranger sword here. But I will say that when you're using any form of latex weapon against a heavier brand like a Calimacil, it can present some interesting challenges. The lighter weapons are obviously going to be able to get more hits in per second. That's a big advantage because you're a lot faster, a lot lighter, you're gonna tire a lot less quickly on the battlefield. But because your weapon is so much lighter, you're gonna have a little bit more trouble blocking strikes from a heavier weapon with more mass, whether that's just because it's bigger and two-handed or because it's actually heavier because it's made out of a dense injected foam like a Calimacil is. Now with a Calimacil, you're going to have a very strong defense because the weapon has the mass to actually block incoming strikes from your opponents. But you might find that turning that defense around into a quick offense takes just a little bit more energy, a little more strength. You might fatigue a little bit more quickly because these are fairly heavy in terms of Larp swords. So it's a little bit of a workout if you're using a Calimacil up against someone that is using a latex weapon, because you have to work a lot harder in order to just maintain the same fight speed that they're able to. They have a better tempo. Now I just want to compare these specific weapons so that I'm not just talking in generalities about the brands. Now, keep in mind that this is purely anecdotal and it relates specifically to this blade, which is a custom Calimacil sword blade made with their custom sword builder. Its point of balance is directly right above the crossguard there, whereas this one, the point of balance is about 3 inches from the hilt, and the Ranger sword, the point of balance is 4 to 5 inches from the hilt. That's a lot more reasonable when we're talking about a real sword. However, when I'm swinging these, I feel like the Calimacil is just a little bit more responsive, and I'm gonna try to articulate that in as few words as I can, but bear with me. Because it has that mass behind it, once you start it swinging, once you have that momentum, it flows really, really nicely, and I think it's because of the edge geometry of the very thin Calimacil sword blades. I think it has better aerodynamics. It does take more force and more effort to initially start that swing, but once you start, it feels a little faster, like the point comes on target more quickly. Don't get me wrong, the Epic Armoury swords are generally always going to be faster than the Calimacil because they're just so much lighter. And as I said, they do have very good balancing. And they're really fun to just swing around. You could swing this around all day, you wouldn't get tired. But against this specific perfectly balanced sword, I feel like I'm encountering just a little bit of resistance with the Epic Armoury swords. So maybe it's just my own personal bias. You know, sometimes I prefer one over the other depending on the day. So at the very least, they're comparable enough that I can't really tell the difference. And maybe I'm just trying to sort of justify to myself that I spent so much money on this. But keep in mind that generally Calimacil swords that are sold as they are in stock are going to be a lot more blade heavy than one of the Epic Armoury swords is. If you are on the weaker side or you just don't want to have to work that hard to swing a sword around, Epic Armoury might be the way to go. I like both of these brands. I have used both of these brands before. They have excellent customer service, they have good products, and I trust them both. But I love my Calimacil swords. I'm of course going to continue to use them. I like the weight, I like the durability, there's no maintenance, and they really let you know that you're holding a sword. You know, they feel very swordy. And they let you know when you land a hit and when you've been hit with one too. But that is actually another thing to consider, because some LARPs don't let you use Calimacil swords because some people think that they hit a little bit too hard. I think that that's becoming a less prevalent problem, especially as Calimacil's technology is continuing to increase with every year. But I know that some LARPs out there exist that don't allow you to use these. I have never been to one of those LARPs. I have never had a Calimacil fail a weapons inspection before, but they are out there. That being said, I have never heard of an Epic Armoury sword failing a weapons inspection ever, unless it's like heavily damaged and the core is sticking out the side of the foam or something. But a stock Epic Armoury sword, I have never heard of failing an inspection at any LARP, ever. Not to say that it doesn't happen, but they're very universal. Now, I've been playing around with these two for the last couple of weeks, doing some drills with them, and I'm happy to say that I really enjoy these hybrid style weapons, especially this Ranger one. I want one. Probably in the longsword length, just given my personal preference, but this is just a really beautiful sword. Although the handle on this Footman sword is actually more comfortable in my opinion, but I just really like the look of this. Doesn't this just, yeah. I don't know. Leave a comment below. Which one do you think looks better on me? Or do you like my sword best? Just let me know what you think. Now, finally, a very important factor, probably for a lot of people, it certainly is for me, is to consider the cost between these two brands. We talked about how they're made, we've talked about how they handle. They're generally very comparable. Their hilt designs are very much the same. They have a varying level of customization for both brands. You can get multiple sizes, different colorations. With these, you have the custom sword builder, multiple sizes variations. With these, they're both going to be very durable. The Calimacil probably a little bit more so, but the Epic Armoury swords are $100 cheaper on average than a Calimacil of comparable size and certainly of comparable design. Calimacil does offer a sort of budget option. It's called their Novice series, and the Bellator handle is actually one of the Novice weapons, although it's supposed to be their two-handed handle. But the Novice series is generally very plain. They run about $80, and the hilts come unpainted. I had this one painted, so it cost me extra money, but they come black, and the blade profiles are generally very simple. You contrast that with the Ranger sword like this, also $80 about, and have all of the details baked right in. Now, you could go buy a Calimacil and you would not regret it. They are just awesome, excellent weapons. You treat it well and it'll last you for the rest of your life probably. You may need to repaint it eventually, but these will last you forever. They can really take a beating. On the other hand, you could also pay half the cost and get one of these Epic Armoury hybrid weapons, and then also have enough money left over to get armor, or a shield, or a dagger in a pouch, or another sword. The list just goes on and on. If your budget is super tight, which I totally understand, LARPing is not a cheap hobby to get into, especially if you have this idea for all of this kit that you wanna have and you wanna look really epic. You might be thinking that the Ready for Battle, the RFB line from Epic Armoury, is the only thing that you are going to be able to afford because they're between like $30 and $50, something like that. In that case, you would be happy to know that they actually do have Ready for Battle, the RFB versions with the polyurethane hilts. If you can afford to wait a little bit to buy your sword, I would highly recommend that you buy one less pouch, something like that. Skip second breakfast for a month, only for a month, Pippin, don't worry, so that you can pass over that Ready for Battle line and go straight to the hybrid weapons from Epic Armoury, because I think they are very worth it. You get a lot more sword for just a percentage of a cost increase on them. It's not like double or something like that for most of them. They're going to be more durable, they're going to be beefier, they're going to be better weighted, they're going to look a lot better, and they're going to last a lot longer. Now, if you are looking for a way that you can continue to save some money while you're getting your gear together, you can actually go ahead and check out these two videos that I've done for you so that you can save that money up for an epic blade. But whatever sword you choose, may it serve you well, may it protect you and yours, and may it never ever break unless you have some elven friends that can reforge it for you right before the din of battle the next morning. I will see you soon, and in the meantime, I'd like to wish you good luck on your adventures.